I'm excited to share this time-saving technique with you in Blender. We're going to be creating this dynamic color palette, and when we select this object, we can change the colors here, and they will update across the entire scene. You can add as many colors as you want or as many palettes as you want and put it to any number of objects, making it really easy to go back and refine your color systems and make changes later. Great, so what we're going to go ahead and do is in our default scene here, we're going to get rid of that pesky cube, and then we're going to hit Shift-A and add a plane. I'm going to tab in the edit mode there. I'm just going to hit R90 and put that up there so that we can see that a bit easier in the front view. Now we're going to be using this object to create our custom properties, which will control the color palette elsewhere in the scene. Now in the final example, I showed you a color palette that had 9 colors. I'm going to show you how to do 2, and then you can just repeat the process if you want more. So with our object selected here, we're going to go ahead and add a material, and let's just call this dynamic color palette. We'll go ahead, drag this over here so that we can see what we are doing. Go ahead, turn on the shader editor there. Great. Now we don't actually need any of this. We're going to go ahead and delete these because this is just going to be a group node that we use elsewhere. Now we're going to come back over here to the object. We're going to go to the Object Properties tab, and we'll twirl this up, come down here to the Custom Properties, and here we begin adding properties to our object. So let's click New here. And you'll see that you get this property kind of template. Well, if we click the little gear icon here, we can change the type from float to float array. And down here in the subtype, we can change this from plain data to linear color. Let's go ahead and click OK. And you can see here now that we have a color on our custom properties where we can go ahead and edit this to be whatever we want. I'm going to switch that to RGB. We're going to hit New. And we're going to do the same exact thing. And then you can name these whatever you want by changing the property name here. I'm going to name mine color 1 and color 2. By default over here, you'll notice that it automatically alphabetizes your list of custom properties, which is incredibly useful for what we're doing. Now let's come back over here to the shader tab with our object selected under dynamic color palette. We're going to hit Shift-A and we're going to search for RGB. And we'll add one of these for each color that we have here. So since we have 2 colors, we'll go ahead and create 2 RGB nodes. Now what we're going to do is we're going to grab both of these nodes, hit Ctrl-G, and this will put us into a group called Node Group. And then we have a group input and a group output. We don't need the group input for this because we're only doing an output for this node group. So let's go ahead and we'll grab this node, put this over here. We're going to drag this top color into there and drag this bottom color into there. And you see that we get these 2 outputs called color, but we want these to match these. This doesn't affect the actual dynamic connection, but it just makes it a bit easier for organization. So if you press the N, you'll get your panel here. You can go to the group tab, and then you can go ahead and change these names here to match. Now we have our scene set up here and our group setup. So I'm going to go ahead, tab back out of there, and you'll see that this brings us back to the outside of the group, which is called the node group. And I'm going to go ahead and just call this dynamic palette. And this will make it easier to call on later. And you can see that we have these color outputs now. So to test this out, let's start adding some additional materials to our scene that we can use on our objects. So we'll tab in edit mode here. I'm going to hit Ctrl-R, split this into 2. I'm going to come over here. I'm going to add 2 materials here and assign 1 to each face. And then I'm going to go ahead and create a color 1 and color 2 material just as an example, but you can use any material you want in your scene. So now when you call on your dynamic color palette, what you'll do is you'll select your material. You'll come in here, you'll hit Shift-A, you'll go down to group, and you'll see that you have the dynamic palette. You can also search for that up here. And then when I drag this in, you'll see that I have color 1 and color 2. So in color 1, I'm going to plug in color 1, and then I'll do the same for 2. Great, so we have our scene set up, but we still need to dynamically connect our properties. So let's come back up here to this dynamic material. We'll go ahead and we'll grab our dynamic palette group, and we're going to tab back into that group. We need to tie these to the custom properties of our object. So let's come over here to our object tab, and then we'll click here, make sure you're set to RGB. And if you click here, make sure you're set to RGB. And what we're going to do is click our color 1 here. We're going to right click the R, and we're going to do copy as new driver, come over to our color 1 here, and then right click and paste as driver here on the R. Now we're going to do that for the G and the B on the color 1, and then we'll repeat the process for color 2. This part is a tad tedious, but it's also going to save you a ton of time in the long run, so just stick to it. So now you should have these purple rims around here to signify that there's a driver on there. And then when we come over here to change our color, you'll see that it dynamically updates in the scene. And this can work across any number of objects or materials. You can also add as many custom properties as you want here. Now what I do is I keep an object here with a dynamic color palette material on it, and then I save this into my asset browser folder. And then I just drag it into my scene so that it brings in the node and everything with it, including the custom properties. Then every instance I drag into the scene operates as another color palette. So I have my color palette set to 9 colors, and I can drag as many of these into the scene as I want to help populate different portions of my scene and control colors in different areas. I hope you found that useful. I'll be putting these project files on my Patreon, and then I also have a bunch of other asset packs and things like that if you want to check those out on Gumroad. Thanks for watching.